Fala galera, seja muito bem-vindo ao nosso canal, Felipe André. E hoje a gente vai fazer um react. O fenômeno da internet aí, que está dizendo ser o Mahdi. Se você não sabe o que é o Mahdi, ele é um dos 12 imãs, né? Lá. Ele é o sucessor de Jesus Cristo, ele fala tudo isso aí, né? Mas o importante é que ele aqui vai fazer uma revelação. O anticristo é o antigo Deus Sol do Egito. Vamos ver o que ele tem a dizer, né? Porque ele tem umas ideias bem peculiar sobre a religião e o passado e tal. Eu não me interesso muito na figura em si de tentar ser messiânica ou tal. Eu interpreto que o Deus Sol da antiguidade era, como se disse, foi a provina circunstância de Deus. Faça-se a luz. E a luz foi feita. E era bom. Então, a partir daquilo se rasgou o verbo. E o verbo se fez carne. Então, através da vibração dessa potência de Deus, que começou-se tudo. Então, para mim, todos vão levar ao mesmo Deus, mas só que cada um levou para o seu nome diferente, entendeu? Mas vamos ver o que ele tem a dizer. Mas antes disso, não se esqueça de se inscrever no meu canal, ativar o sininho de notificações, dar um comentário e vamos embora pro vídeo.
Yeah, what is the significance of the golden calf? And that is one that we have to begin to kind of follow the symbols and walk and try to uncover the mysteries of ancient Egypt together.
Okay.
Divino Ilusteriano, então catequizando o povo, gente. Aí, ó, vamos ver o que ele tem a dizer sobre esse tema. Rapaz, o cara tem lá o templo dele, tudo, né? Tal, tá diferente do que tá viralizando, né? O que tá viralizando é um post mais novo, que ele tá nesse tapume aí, falando que ele é o novo Papa, o sucessor de Jesus Cristo e tal. Mas vamos ver essa catequização aí vamos ver. Vamos ver.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الإمام المهدينا وسلم تسليما السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My dear sister and companion Tiffany.
Walaikum salam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear father.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
God bless you. So today we're going to examine, I think, a little bit of an interesting topic. And it's an episode today that's going to touch upon a lot of different topics and subjects, I think. But the overarching theme of the episode will be the influence of ancient Egypt on the Abrahamic religions, meaning Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And we will start with the most obvious of all of the symbols, and that is the golden calf that the Israelites were worshiping. Mm-hmm. If we were to look at the single most, vile sin that the Israelites committed, the one sin that caused them really to make God extremely infuriated was that they took a different God other than God. Yeah. They broke the most important of all of the commandments that were given to Moses. And this took place on multiple occasions, most notably in the story of the Exodus, when the Israelites were waiting on Moses because he had went forth to meet God. And during his absence, which according to the Quran was supposed to be 30 days and 30 nights, but then it was extended for an additional 10 days and 10 nights. During that time period, basically a man by the name of the Samari, he went forward and he encouraged, he seduced, he convinced the Israelites that they should give all of their gold, and he melted it and he constructed out of it a calf. And the calf seemed to have powers. according to the narrations, the power to make certain sounds. According to one narration, the sounds of a living calf. In other narrations, it was making audible sounds like human language. It was speaking at particular times. And so it was a miraculous golden calf that the Samari had told the Israelites that this is your God that helped take you, up out of Egypt. And they began to circle around the golden calf and clap and whistle and celebrate like the polytheists, and make fires around the golden calf and offer the golden calf sacrifices and sacraments. And they used to perform and conduct certain rituals. They had totally reverted back from the religion of their ancestors, Abraham. They abandoned the God of Moses, and they went back to the worship of the golden calf that was prominent in Egypt. And when you look at the artwork and the movies that basically show the scenes of the golden calf, you'll always find that it's a golden calf that's fashioned in the same way that the calf of ancient Egypt was. All right.
Interessante, vamos lá. Tá tendo a tradução ali, a gente vai lendo, por isso que eu tô calado, para a gente poder estar lendo e vendo que o que ele tá falando, se tá ali batendo com a dublagem certinha. Até o momento tá tudo ok, estamos aí 10. Valeu? Então, o que acontece? Não sei se tem aquela passagem lá do bezerro de ouro, né, e tal, que quando Moisés vai lá pegar as tábuas, eles estão lá adorando, né? Não pode adorar a imagem e tal. Se você não sabe, vai lá e lê a Bíblia, que aí você vai saber que tem essa passagem. E aí Moisés ficou chateado, quebrou as tábuas e tal, então eles estavam adorando aquele bezerro. Então ele está dizendo que os antigos voltaram ao bezerro de ouro, né? No caso, tanto é que tem um touro, né? O bezerro é um pequeno touro, né? Tem um touro lá na Wall Street de ouro, né? De ouro não, para parecer que ele é de ouro. Voltaram a adorar o bezerro de ouro. Ou seja, que provavelmente ele está na toda a riqueza, toda a luxúria que aquilo lhe dá, que é o mercado financeiro. Por isso que ele fala exatamente da adoração do bezerro. Essa classe que está tomando conta de Israel, realmente, ela é uma classe bem privilegiada. Até que tem até imagens aí na internet, aí você pode ver que tem israelense lá que já tem carro voador. Vou botar aí para você na imagem. É notícia, não estou tirando nada da minha cabeça. Tem uma galera lá que ela é bem, bem rica. Então, essa classe que é a dominante de Israel, não o povo, não os meros mortais como eu e você, sim uma outra elite que está fora desse sistema político. Eu vou começar a botar assim para vocês. Existe nós, o povo. Existe a classe que administra o povo, que é os políticos, juiz, judiciário, essa loucura aí. E eles são financiados por uns caras, que são os caras da alta indústria, os caras que fazem comércio internacional, os caras milionários. Pelo menos já começa essa classe, pelo menos os caras têm que estar aí ganhando de 1 milhão para cima. Todo mês fácil. 1 milhão, 2 milhões, 3 milhões, 4 milhões para cima eles estão fazendo. Eles estão no meio do caminho com essa classe que administra, pois essa classe financia a classe que administra. Por isso que a gente tem essa distorção. Depois veio o mercado financeiro, que é maior ainda, que é o comércio internacional, comércio global. Nesse comércio global, a brincadeira já é de bilhão. E essa classe está acima dessas outras duas que eu acabei de falar para você. A classe administradora, ela pega até os caras de milhão ali, 10, 15 milhões por mês. De 15 milhões para baixo, a nossa classe administrativa ela já não pega mais os caras. É esses caras que estão fora do sistema, que a gente vive eu e você. E lá, por isso que ele está falando desse bezerro de ouro. Que essa classe, essa galera, adora um bezerro de ouro, que é o bezerro do Antigo Egito. E é verdade, na história lá de Moisés, tem exatamente isso.
Right, the Apis bowl or the Hathor statue was made. And that's not the only symbol of ancient Egypt that they had with them. They had the Ark of the Covenant, and the Ark of the Covenant is also not an originally Jewish kind of construction. They already had these arks, like the Ark of Horus, and you can see it right now on the screen. that existed in ancient Egypt. You had the arks that Anubis would sit on top of and guard, and inside of these arks they would put particular jars that contained within it body parts of the deceased, and there were actually two arks, according to scripture, that were carried out of Egypt. One ark that carried the body of Joseph, and another ark that contained within it the Holy Spirit and some of the relics of the Israelites, or the relics of Moses and Aaron in particular, were carried inside of them. Manna, the tablets, some narrations state the staff of Moses, others don't. And so you had these particular relics that were attached to the ark. And so the ark was ancient Egyptian. The angels that were depicted on top of the ark, these were also these winged angels or cherubim. These are also coming from ancient Egypt, and we have other examples of arks like this one in the museum that contained on it depictions of winged beings that were guarding the four corners of the ark. And so we can see that Moses was heavily influenced by his upbringing in the palace of Pharaoh and in ancient Egypt. That's where he grew up. That's how he was educated. And he kind of brought that with him when he was establishing the new covenant with God, or the religion of Judaism. The golden calf, though, is the most intriguing of them all, because not only did it cause God to become so angry, but there's a lot of things that are missing from the story.
Olha só, ele falou muitas informações aí, vamos por partes, igual o Diego Estripador. Ele alega que o convívio com Moisés no palácio está lá escrito na Bíblia. Isso interferiu no Moisés, e ele, ao fazer a Arca da Aliança, que tinha os instrumentos lá de Deus, que fez um novo trato com Deus, essa arca já tinha, como você viu na imagem, a barca de Osíris e a barca de Sete, que era o cachorro, Anubis, no caso. Era Anubis em cima da caixa, seres alados, essas coisas todas. Então, isso veio tudo dessa religião. Apesar de que no nosso vídeo aqui, daquela série do Egito Antigo, ele deixa claro lá também, Moisés, ele era da corte. Se ele era da corte, ele era da escola de iniciados. Ele tinha que fazer toda aquela iniciação, porque o faraó é o Deus vivo na terra. E os seus súditos têm que ser dignos. Então Moisés fez toda a peregrinação para poder estar ao lado do rei ali. Então ele era um dos iniciados de Hermes, ou Imhotep, ou você queira outro nome, você decide. Então ele está trazendo essa analogia, dizendo que Moisés fez essa adaptação junto, pois ficaram-se muitos anos escravos lá no Egito, né? Então vamos continuar aí, ponto de vista interessante. Ele vai explicar do bezerro agora.
In the Quran and in the Torah, the question is left unanswered as to why and how did the Israelites become convinced that this would be a good idea. We also don't have the history of in writing or present in the Torah that explains to us what had happened during those years prior to the advent of Moses. Were the Israelites, or some of the Israelites, engaging in these acts of worship in ancient Egypt? If they were engaging in that, was it all of them? Was it some of them? Did they become sort of kind of like a polytheistic nation or group of people that did worship the ancient Egyptian gods and appealed to them, but at the same time they preserved, their belief in the God of Abraham, and hence they were waiting for the emergence of the Messiah from the Israelites? How and why did they fall into this trap? How could it be that Moses, after they cross with him the Red Sea and they're witness to all of these magnificent miracles of the sea splitting open and the cloud accompanying them in the sky and manna coming down from the heaven and a pillar of fire guiding them through the night and guarding them, how could they, after all of these miracles, which are arguably, to be honest with you, arguably even greater than the miracles that Jesus, had done in the New Testament, with the exception of raising the dead, even though somebody could argue as well that, Moses and his companions that, were shocked to death by God, that they did also resurrect from the dead. So you do have that argument there, but he certainly brought some of the greatest miracles of all time. There's no other prophet in the maybe Elijah with bringing down fire from the sky, but for the most part, Moses probably had the most awesome miracles in the history of the prophets and the messengers. And
ele faz uma alegação aqui, de eu não sei da onde, que tem registro que... Assim, ele tira da Bíblia, óbvio, abrir o Mar Vermelho, trazer um bagulho do céu, que foi Elias e tal, que como ele disse aí. Ele tá trazendo esse argumento, mas isso aí eu enxergo que não é a população em si, é a classe dominante. Essa classe dominante não faz parte do povão. Quer seguir ali Deus direitinho, quer ser honesto, quer trabalhar, quer ter uma vida normal. Só que existe uma classe que está acima e essa classe se perdeu no deserto, sendo que eles podiam fazer uma coisa muito melhor do que a que eles fazem hoje, que é guerra e destruição. Essa é a verdade, eles se perderam no deserto. Eles têm tudo na mão para fazer o negócio ser uma utopia, para ser bem sincero para você. Tem tudo, mas eles não conseguem fazer, não querem fazer. Eu acho. Voltando ao que ele está falando, eu não acho que é exatamente a população se perdeu. Simplesmente foi essa classe dominante que, infelizmente, se voltou para o outro lado e que quer ser dona de tudo. É uma disputa pelo planeta agora, né? Já não é mais uma disputa de Estado contra Estado, nação contra nação. É uma disputa pelo planeta. E essa disputa pelo planeta é bem diferente do que quando era Moisés ou Elias, ou qualquer outro profeta. Aquela geração, eu creio que muitos deles sabem exatamente tudo o que aconteceu certinho, porque não tem registro histórico, como ele falou, né? Escrito. Moisés fez feitos incríveis, assim como os outros profetas antes dele. Vamos continuar.
So how is it that his nation, that are supposed to be God's chosen people, just because he was absent for a short period of time, how could they become seduced into worshiping a golden statue of a cow of all things, And why the cow in particular? There were many different gods and goddesses that existed in ancient Egypt. Many of them were in the form of a human being, such as Amun, but they chose this particular idol. And the thing that is mind-baffling and stunning even more so than that is the idea that even after Moses comes back and he reprimands them and he punishes them, and God says that they have to kill each other, and the 600,000 Israelites are chasing each other with the sword, murdering one another, until Moses tells them to stop, as kind of a punishment for the idolatry that they were engaging in. Even after their children wrote down these tales of warning and preserved it in the written and the oral Torah, you find that during the kingdom of Israel, after it was established, and after David rules, and after he passes away, and after Solomon rules, and he has a kingdom like no other, and he passes away, what happens? We find that the Israelites fight amongst one another over who's the legitimate successor, and then the kingdom of Israel is broken down into two. You have the northern kingdom of Israel, which is called Israel, and then it consists of basically 10 tribes. The 12 tribes of Israel are divided. 10 of the tribes make up the northern kingdom of Israel, and the other two tribes, mainly Judah and Benjamin, they end up taking, forming the southern kingdom of Judah, which was underneath Israel, and it was the kingdom of Judah that had within it the capital of Jerusalem.
Yes.
And so the kingdom of Israel, not wanting their people to have to go down to the kingdom of Judah lest they be influenced and they end up surrendering to the power of the kingdom of Judah, they wanted to keep their independence. They wanted to have all of their own facilities and their own army and their own identity that was separate than the kingdom of Judah. And so they ended up basically reconstructing temples where they can practice idolatry, and oddly enough, they end up going back to the worship of the golden calf. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, to me this is extremely puzzling, and it's quite a scriptural mystery, because it seems like such a dramatic 180. And as you're saying, it's like a repetition of the exact same thing. Even though they knew that it was a horrible mistake and it's recorded in the scriptures, they ended up falling into the same mistake again. So I'm curious to know, what is the answer? Why this golden calf? What is the significance of the golden calf?
Yeah.
Ele fala algumas coisas assim, são só impactantes, galera, mas 2 palitos, tu pensando nisso, você acaba resolvendo isso. Por que ao invés de perguntarem para Deus quem seria seu líder, por que eles pegaram e não seguiram a ordem? Eles resolveram brigar entre eles. Porque muitos ali já estavam chegando a uma outra classe, né? E essa classe se dividiu ali, né? Em 2 tribos, como ele explicou. Como diria, né? O exército é o leão da tribo de Judá, né? Entendeu? E os outros queriam outro tipo de reino. Com isso, um começou a aceitar outras práticas e o outro permaneceu não fazendo isso. O significado do bezerro de ouro. Vamos ver.
Yeah, what is the significance of the golden calf? And that is one that we have to begin to kind of follow the symbols and walk and try to uncover the mysteries of ancient Egypt together.
Okay.
Verdade, o simbolismo e o ocultismo começou tudo lá no Egito. Toda essa parte simbólica que você vê até hoje, até nas propagandas, até em tudo. O homo é uma coruja, entendeu? 2. E o M, que é o nariz da coruja. Tem caixa da homo antiga disso, não estou falando de doideira não. Vou botar a imagem aí para você ver o que eu estou falando é verdade. A caixa da homo é uma coruja. É um símbolo oculto, né? Tá ali, mas ninguém sabe. Mas todo mundo pega todo dia, todo mundo vê na prateleira do mercado e tal. Isso é só um exemplo de muitas coisas antigas que vêm a reboque até hoje aí.
So basically, the golden calf that they were worshiping was prominent in Egypt, and the most prominent of all golden calves that existed at that time in ancient Egypt was the calf that represented Hathor. Hathor was an ancient Egyptian goddess, and she was depicted usually as either a human being that had horns, okay, or she was depicted as a cow or a calf that had horns with the sun disk in between the 2 horns, as you see on the screen right now.
Okay.
And she was considered to be the consort of Ra. Okay. Ra was the sun god of ancient Egypt, and she was actually considered to be the eye of Ra. Okay, so you know the one eye symbol of ancient Egypt, like you see on the screen right now. This one eye symbol of ancient Egypt was a symbol of the consort of Ra, whose title was the Eye of Ra. And the Eye of Ra was Hathor. And so Hathor would be depicted as an eye, a one eye, or she would be depicted as the cow.
Okay.
That had with her the horns, and in between the horns, the sun disk. So now we have a lot of important symbols. And now it kind of brings more context to the mystery that's at hand. Yeah. Because now what we have actually is the Israelites, not once, but twice, gaining the wrath of God. Because the first time God makes them kill each other, the second time he actually eliminates the kingdom of Israel. Mm-hmm. He causes the Assyrians to destroy them and to banish them completely, and so they become the lost 10 tribes, because till this very day, nobody knows who they are or where they are. They became dispersed amongst the nations, exiled from the promised land forever. And for that reason, every single Jew that is alive today, is really a Jew because they attribute themselves, in most cases, to the tribe of Judah, or the tribe of Benjamin, or the tribe of Levi, because Levi didn't get any land, right? Joseph, he ended up getting two shares, Ephraim and Manasseh. Mm-hmm. And Ephraim and Manasseh, they both got dispersed with the 10 tribes. And then you have there Benjamin, and you have Judah, and you have Levi, because there were some Levite priests that operated the temples in the northern kingdom of Israel and also in the south in the kingdom of Judah. Wow. So now we only have members of 3 tribes. The rest of the 10 tribes are gone with the wind. So you have the Israelites worshiping and taking another God other than Yahweh, other than Hashem, other than the God of Israel, other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they're worshiping in his place the one eye.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's very interesting.
That is very interesting.
Primeiro que o olho é o de Horus que perdeu na batalha, né? Que é o filho de Ra. Não, filho de Ra não. No caso, ele é filho de Ísis, com Osíris, no Fálon de ouro, que ela reconstruiu e se acasalou com Osíris. Ele botou diretamente Ra ligado a nisso, e junto com Raptor, que existe mesmo essa deusa que ele falou, não tem essa informação que ele disse aí. O olho que tudo vê é de Horus, aquele símbolo. Não tem nada a ver com Ra. Eu sei que Horus e Ra às vezes é até confundido, mas o simbolismo do olho que tudo vê é de Horus, da perca da batalha, né? Ele fez ali um samba do crioulo doido, né, compadre? E sobre a disputa entre as tribos, aconteceu, verdade. As outras tribos foram sumindo, saíram, enquanto ficou a tribo de Judá, de Benjamim e a do Levi, que a do Levi é a galera que ficava ali tomando conta das datas, fazendo as orações, fazendo os ritos para Deus.
It's very interesting. It's and the fact that it's just this history that, this pattern that has repeated itself in history, I find it quite fascinating.
It is, and it's fascinating too, because you have now them having in their history worshipped the golden calf, which is actually Hathor. And one of Hathor's symbols is the one eye, and she is the eye of Ra. And so when they depicted her in human form, or they depicted her in calf form, they only depicted, because the ancients, they used to depict the gods in ways that the human mind could fathom.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. But it's reality, the reality of the God that they were trying to depict was this one-eyed consort of the sun god Ra. Mm-hmm. And we're going to get into that in a minute, but I just think that it's quite interesting that they are the same people whom rejected their Messiah when he came, and they are still actively waiting for a Messiah to come. And the narrations from Muhammad and the family of Muhammad alayhi salam state that it is the Jews that are going to follow, as they're waiting for their Messiah, they're going to end up following the Antichrist or the false Messiah, who is going to be what? One-eyed.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy. That is fascinating.
So they worship the golden calf once, they worship the golden calf twice, and in the end times, the Israelites worship and follow the golden calf, Hathor, the eye of Ra, the false Messiah, the Antichrist, the one-eyed Dajjal in the end time.
Wow. Thank you for unraveling that mystery. I think that symbolism is very clear, and as we can see, it's just a pattern that is meant to be fulfilled in the end times. And wow, thank you.
It is quite interesting, isn't it?
It's mind-blowing, actually. I never would have put those things together.
So now let's look and see what is the appeal for them to actually worship this one-eyed God. And it all goes back to the actual mystery cults of the ancient world. Now, when you go look into the ancient cross culture, if you go look into the ancient Egyptian culture and religions, if you go look into the ancient Greece, if you look into ancient Greek religions, if you look into the ancient Roman religions, if you look into the ancient religions of the Mayans, of the Aztecs, of the Phoenicians, of pretty much every ancient culture that existed, they had a myth that was similar. And the myth that was similar had to do with the sun. And so they formed these mystery cults that worshipped the sun, and they all had a story that had to do with the god that they were worshiping that was similar in nature. And basically, the ancient Egyptian mystery, the cult of the worship of Ra and Hathor has to do as following. It states as following. It says that every day the sun would be in the sky, and the sun would provide warmth and life and growth, and it would nurture the creatures that are living on the earth. And the people of the ancient world thought that the worship of the sun was appealing because of that. Because who provides life? Who is more of a provider of life other than the sun? The sun is kind of like the primary, God. It's the God that nobody can live without, right? We all need light. We all need warmth. We all need the sun. When the sun's up, all of the creatures are animated, right? When the sun goes down, everything kind of goes to death or goes to sleep, right?
Yes.
And it's
É, ele está trazendo agora uma explicação interessante porque todo mundo adorava o sol, porque é isso mesmo, todo mundo adora o sol, porque o sol é que traz aí. Se ficar na escuridão o tempo todo, a planta não cresce, o bagulho não flui. Tem que ter sol, entendeu? Tu não vai pra rua ganhar um carvão, ninguém. O bagulho é ir pra rua no sol, né? A energia é o sol, tanto é que tem placa solar, a energia é o sol. Então, tudo é em torno girado do sol. Então, por isso que antigamente a galera achava que o deus maior era o sol.
all quiet outside. So we need the sun in order to be active, in order to be healthy. And so they saw that this was an important God to worship, if not the primary God to worship. They would notice that the sun would set every day. And when the sun set, they would have to explain, and they thought to, how can we explain where the sun goes? And they stated that basically they came to the conclusion that every evening when Ra would set, the sun would set, it would be accompanied by Hathor, its eye and its protector, and they would go into the underworld. And they would travel throughout the underworld, and they would meet good people, and they would meet enemies and bad people. And they would engage in battles, and they would engage in blessings. So where is the underworld? The underworld would be where all of the dead people go, all of the deceased people go. And so for the ancient Egyptian, when the sun sets on us, it would rise on the people of the afterlife.
Okay.
And the people of the afterlife would celebrate the coming of the sun. And they would become animated, and they would, have life in them, and they would celebrate the presence of the sun amongst them. But there would be other enemies of the sun, like a serpent god of the underworld that would seek to trap the sun there so that it could not rise the next morning. And so it would engage in a battle, and it would punish the serpent, and it would defeat it, and it would become victorious, and the sun would prove itself to be invincible, and it would rise the next morning on us, and it would give life again to us who are living in the day.
Você acaba percebendo que o mito da serpente é antiguíssimo, né? Ou seja, Ra tinha que ir lá matar a serpente, porque senão Não tinha outro dia.
This same myth, which explained the cycle of the sun for the ancient Egyptians, is the exact same myth that we find in ancient Rome when they were worshiping Sol Invictus, the invincible sun. They would have the same myth where Sol Invictus, the invincible sun, would travel into the underworld and it would defeat the enemies of the underworld and it would shine its light on the people of the underworld, and then it would rise the next morning. For the ancient Greeks, you had the same thing with Helios and Apollo, those gods of the sun, and it would be the same kind of ride where they're riding on the chariot and they would go down into the underworld and they would emerge the next day. And so we find the same story is repeating itself throughout the different cultures.
Yeah. You just made
O assunto vai se repetindo, mas de maneira diferente, né? Você vai contando a história, vai botando os outros arquétipos ali para você poder estar entendendo a história, né? Isso que é simbolismo.
me think about symbolism that you would find in Catholic churches sometimes, especially in Italy, where you find the sun symbol and the eye symbol, and it's, if you research into it, it's meant to have this connection to Sol Invictus, exactly as you're talking about this, this story.
The cycle of the sun.
Yeah.
And so the cycle of the sun became really important for the ancients, and they celebrated the sunrise, and they celebrated, or were mystified by the sunset. The sunset would be a celebration for the underworld. The sunrise would be a celebration for the people, on top of the earth, the living world, so to speak. And it basically became a god that we would worship. Now, what's fascinating is that in Islam we find this hadith, and the hadith repeats itself on the tongue of many different narrators. And it's a hadith that's present in Sunni Islam, and it's a hadith that's present also in Shia Islam. And the narration or the tradition, it comes in a couple different forms, but basically it states that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the sun sets and rises between the horns of the devil. Okay. So this is important. Why? It's important because we have these symbols of there being horns, right? And the sun being in between the horns.
Yes.
Okay. Because that's the exact same symbol that we find on top of the calf that was worshipped by the Israelites. This sun disk that is placed right at the center of the horns that are on top of the cow. And actually all throughout ancient Egypt, on top of the heads of many different ancient Egyptian gods, as you can see now in the images, they are depicted having always these two horns with the sun disk in between them.
Okay.
So could that be a coincidence? There's no such thing as a coincidence. That the ancient Egyptian culture, which lent the worship of the calf.
Verdade, não existem coincidências. Quando você achar que tem uma coincidência ali, um simbolismo está ali por algum motivo, não existem coincidências, é tudo bem pensado.
To the Israelites and the Abrahamic religions, that eventually you have the Muhammadan religion, the religion of Islam, and its prophet warning the Muslims. And he says in another narration to never, ever, ever prostrate or worship God at all during those two times. During the time that the sun is setting, nor do you worship God at the time that the sun is rising. And in another tradition, he explains that it's because the devil has placed a throne at the site of the sunrise and the site of the sunset. And so when the sun rises and when the sun sets, it rises and sets between his horns. And anybody that worships during those times, the devil himself speaks to his host of demons, and he says to them, the sons of Adam are worshiping me.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. I feel like there's important symbolism in there.
There's very important symbolism there, because now we have the devil himself making himself and placing himself as the consort, right? He's putting himself as a companion of the sun at its sunrise and at its sunset, very much so as the ancient Egyptians had placed the eye of Ra, Hathor, as a consort for the sun as it set and as it rose the next morning upon the people. And so these themes now, these symbols we're finding are very much present. The eye, we have the horns now, we have the sun disk that is rising and setting in between the horns.
Eu não concordo muito bem com essa aí, que ele tá misturando algumas coisas aí de simbolismos e ocultismo jogando diferente, mas ele tá tentando ligar os pontos ali.
This is very important.
Yeah. Wow, it's very connected. It's very much connected.
Very, very much connected with one another. When we look for these symbols elsewhere, we find that the symbols of the horns and the symbol of the sun is present in another story in the Quran. It's a very famous story in Surah Al-Kahf, the Surah of the cave. This is pretty much the only place that you find these two symbols gathered together, the horns and the sun. And that is the story of Zulkarnain. Okay, because you have this man in the surah whose name is Zulkarnain. Zulkarnain in Arabic means he with two horns. Okay, so you have a character whose name is he with two horns, and his story revolves around basically the Quran states that he's traveling. God grants him a way. He grants him a reason, a way to, in all things. He grants him ability over all things. And he initially travels to the location of the sunset. And at the location of the sunset, he finds a group of people over there. And it was told to Zulkarnain by God, it was told to him that
Eu vou ter que pesquisar essa história aí do Corão aí, que acontece isso. Eu não tenho base afirmativa para dizer que isso que ele está falando aí acontece. Acontece esse nome e essa tradução que ele fez aí também.
that these people, you can either do good to them or you can punish them as you wish. And then it states that then he travels to the opposite end, to the location of the sunrise. And it is at the sunrise where he finds over there a people that have not been veiled from the sun. And then it says that he travels until he reaches a location between the two barriers, right? And it's there in between the two barriers that he finds a nation over there that can barely speak a word. And these people that can barely speak a word, they basically are wanting Zulkarnain to help them create some sort of a dam or a gate or a blockade between them and between this evil nation of creatures called Gog and Magog. And when we pay close attention to the journey of Zulkarnain, we can find that obviously, look, the surahs of the Quran, they have in there, I'll preface by saying this, they have in there many meanings. And there are many traditions from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam which explain this concept and this factor. They state that a third of the Quran has come down about us, a third of the Quran has come down about our enemies, and a third of the Quran are the stories of the first nations, the people of old, the previous prophets and messengers and their people.
Você já pegou o contexto aí de essa face messiânica tá querendo aparecer pro planeta, né? Misturando alguns mitos, trazendo alguns jargões e memes que, ao meu ver, não fazem muito sentido e tentando, por assim, tomar conta de uma coisa que não é seu, né? Eu espero que tudo isso se resolva. Eu acho que ele não vai chegar tão lá, porque a coisa é muito bem produzida, você vê que tem alguém financiando isso não é assim que se faz, né? Isso não é barato de fazer, isso custa caro, isso custa dinheiro. Ele está começando a tentar fazer essa doutrina via internet, através desses vídeos aí. É bom a gente ficar de olho. Acredito que ele não seja mesmo o anticristo, nada nesse sentido, simplesmente mais um cara fazendo uma religião e expondo algumas verdades sobre o simbolismo. Sobre o simbolismo ele falou muita coisa ali que realmente bate com simbologias e tal, que a coisa vem lá do Egito e que foi se misturando. E é isso. Não esqueça de deixar o seu like, se inscrever aqui no meu canal. Até o próximo vídeo. Valeu!